Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Rewilded Wellness with Lydia Joy. I am stopping by with another impromptu episode for you. Sometimes things just come through and I'm able to just put some perspective on it. And I always feel like I should just go ahead and do an episode when that happens. Um, for those of you who don't know, I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and I have been working with the use of the tool hair tissue mineral analysis in my functional nutrition work since 2014. Early on, I couldn't shut up about it. I was learning so much. It was helping me and my son and my practice so much that everyone was like, well, teach us what you know, teach us what you know. And so I put together like an initial understanding of, everything I had gleaned and learned at the time and put it into a practitioner course. I no longer teach that course, and there is a big reason why, but I do still want to support my fellow practitioners, and they do still keep reaching out to me. Many people reach out to me asking me like, can you teach me? And I get it because I did the very same thing early on. I wanted to learn from someone else who had more experience than me. So I want to dedicate this episode to the practitioners out there. And a lot of one of the things that a lot of people say to me, when they're reaching out is like, you have such a balanced approach from what I can tell based on, everything they've seen me posting about on either Instagram or maybe they've actually delved into my podcast. And so I want to just kind of talk about this a little bit, a balanced approach to HTMA practice, because, a lot more people are coming to this work, a lot more so than when I first started. When I first started, it was like, you would talk about it, it was like crickets. Everyone was like, what are you talking about? And now it seems like everyone and their mother is, jumping into this work, which is awesome. And also I can imagine, like if I were new now in the scope that's out there, I would feel incredibly overwhelmed. There's just a lot. There's a lot out there, a lot of people's perspectives, points of view, how they've learned, and so on and so forth. And so it's a lot to navigate. And this is what I think people are reaching out for, is like they are completely overwhelmed. And when they hear the way I'm framing it, they're like, oh my gosh, this makes more sense to me. All right. So I know I'm not for everyone. I know not everyone is going to align with how I approach things, and that's totally fine. But for those of you who do, the practitioners who frequently do reach out to me, um, that's who I'm really speaking to, the perspective that I want to share and what I was looking for when I was just beginning, as well as how I can support those of you who are seeking deeper knowledge in this field at this time without like a deeper dive HTMA course, so to speak. So my journey to a balanced HTMA approach, when I first started exploring minerals, I carefully evaluated different teachers' approaches to determine who I wanted to learn from. And at the time, it wasn't very many. There was very few people teaching this at all. And so what helped me most was really starting to shore up my understanding of the fundamental principles first. And, going back to how it got started and, going from there. And then considering others' approaches thoughtfully rather than accepting them without question, which is where we get into dogma, right? We get into dogma when we take someone's approach and, use it as like our own, and then it becomes very black and white. And really, we need to take the principles, filter it through our own personal experience, which we need to have and grow into over time in order to speak to this. And so at the time, Dr. Malter stood out as the most neutral and gentle teacher at the time. At first I was like, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of stuff. All these couple other people have more stuff, and part of me was like enamored with like, "Oh my gosh, so and so has all this info, like, but Dr. Mel just only has this one book and it's so simple. Like, how could that be effective?" Right? That's kind of like some of my thought process back then. But he really was incredibly grounded, which was something I needed at the time. And so I reached out to him directly rather than taking a standard course. Um, I just wanted to cut to the chase and get straight to the person and ask the questions I had, right? And my priority was my own HTMA journey first and foremost for myself and my son. Um, so that I could feel confident in our journey to then take it further, as well as develop my professional approach. That was like more my secondary goal. Like I didn't feel like I could truly comprehend this any other way than with, understanding it for myself and my family first. And start to see the results. And, that's what I needed the most. So before I could feel like someone's curriculum was going to meet me as an individual, I wanted individual care. And that's how I started. Okay. And so then this led me to study the core principles extensively. I consumed all the available resources. I was reading and rereading materials, applying what I learned, seeking feedback, returning to study more when I was ready for deeper understanding. Getting in the arena and doing the work, like jumping off the deep dive into the pool and learning how to swim along the way. And throughout this process, I maintained connections with one or two mentors further along in the field with whom I could process information. I never joined like some big community. That was always just way too overwhelming for me. And I found it to be far more distracting than being very focused with feedback from those I trusted, that we built an established comprehensive understanding of one another, how each other operated, and was that to me was more effective. Um it's just how I operate. I'm like not the big group kind of person. I'm a little more like, let's get deep and personal with just a few people. So that explains why I took that approach, right? So what I discovered though through this whole journey has shaped my entire practice philosophy, which is what I want to share with you. So there is kind of this whole, because it's growing, because more people are coming to the table and wanting to partake. It feels like people are looking at it as like a divide, right? Maybe in these different HTMA approaches. And that's the same is true, with anything out there in the world. So in the world of functional health and mineral analysis, I'm noticing this kind of like divide, if you will, in approaches. Although I am seeing people seek homeostasis, right? In how they practice, which is what they're saying to me and what they're looking for, right? So on the one side, there's this kind of like old school. I'm going to say old school because what I mean by that is the original practitioners who were around with Dr. Eck taught a certain way, taught from their own from their own experience. And, um, but then there's also too the concept of like how we've practiced medicine in this country, and then how that has transferred over to how we practice in the holistic space as well, right? So it's like identify and attack, if you will, or maybe it's not exactly that, but it's just a very much more therapeutic versus like this very nuanced, gentle, bio-individual understanding of what today's overwhelmed human bodies truly need. So remember, I said in a past episode, like the past mentors who brought this into the world, um, their ceiling is our floor, right? Like we're the ones who are now dealing with, massive rapid changes in people over the decades since this modality has been initiated, created, and it's definitely the world is evolving. So we have to constantly be in a growth edge so that we can take the principles and make them make more sense to meet um the collective nervous system, if you will, like the pulse of the collective. And, you know, uh, if you're practicing in a certain manner based on so and so's approach or the lab's recommendations, you aren't going to really be able to truly um, do this for individuals, right? So I think there's like this hyperfixation that has been there, still is there, and I don't think it's very helpful. So I think there's a more strategic way to approach HTMA. When we identify, all the bad things, right? Like even the imbalances or the toxins or the heavy metals or the infections or pathogens in a client, right? And our first instinct might be to, this immediate targeted intervention. However, the question isn't simply like what's present, but rather, what requires attention now versus what can be addressed through building foundational resilience. Like the distinction is crucial in today's concept, I'm sorry, not concept, in today's complex landscape. Like the health landscape of our times is very complicated, and it shouldn't be, but it is because of all the things that we are dealing with, all the things that have disrupted our ability to get towards homeostasis. So this is what I do. I evaluate each case by asking some critical questions, you know because this is what I needed to be done for me, as I went along in my mineral balancing journey, right? So the first thing is like, okay, so let's say we find a toxin or an imbalance in a person, right? I'm always like, is this like a bleeding neck issue? Do you know what I mean, guys? Like, if someone's neck is bleeding, it means their throat was cut, and it's like emergent, right? Like it's urgent, it's acute. It needs to be immediately addressed, right? Like, and that is the difference between like acute related concerns and longer term, I guess I would say just like I would consider it more chronic health issues, right? However, even with something that may not be like radically acute, like requiring immediate medical intervention per se, it's like the question is this something that is, if this person doesn't deal with it like sooner than later, where are they going to be in the next 3 months, right? Like, is it, you know what I mean? Like, we have to look at this and say, all right, what is the top priority here? We can look at a HTMA and we can see all kinds of things that we could do. But the question is what is going to move the needle the most for that person to get them relief now while meeting their biochemistry, while also like building towards something. So we also receive, you know, buy-in. And I don't mean buy-in so that they like keep investing with us. I mean like so that they trust the process. So they feel safe and stable and have belief in this modality and in this work and realize, oh wow, this actually can help me, right? Because they can't see ahead the way that we should be able to see ahead for them, right? Does it make sense? Um, and then second, like, can we also look at a person and their HTMA and first improve fundamental functions that will naturally diminish the impacts of the bleeding neck issues, if you will, or the higher pain points a person is coming to you with, right? And how does the issue or issues that they are coming to you with correlate with their current nervous system capacity, which we can see on a hair test? Right? Like if you can see in their pattern their degree of different ratio imbalances and whatnot, plus you are listening to the person, you are sensing where they're at, right? Like, how can we meet that within what we're hearing them say, how we're seeing them mirror to us through their body language, in addition to what we're reading on the actual graph, right? So how can we get them into a place of greater stability, right? Because if we give them a giant protocol, which maybe so and so teaching course gave us to replicate and reuse, oh my goodness, that could incredibly overwhelm them, right? We may have to chunk it way back. And, if someone hasn't taught you how to do that, you might not have figured that out for yourself either. So then finally, we always have to be asking, like, well, what is the person's readiness? And what is their availability, right? Like, in terms of resources, like, meaning, do they have the space and time? Do they have, you know, a 10-hour a day job 5 days a week and very little bandwidth? Do they have money to invest? Do they have, what are their current resources? Like let's assess where they're at so we can be, considerate of that and not just give them some big giant enormous protocol with umpteen things that they have to go and now buy, and then like, wow, that's overwhelming. We've got to find what is going to move the needle and help them now as well as help them in the long run. And I think that sometimes these overwhelming game plans can be a lot. I mean, I myself like to give as much as I can give, but I also understand like not everyone has the capacity for tackling it all, right? So we have to have these conversations with our clients as well, and we have to chunk things down. And it's important. It's just really, really important. Such a crucial part of this work. We have to get beyond the, like, there's this protocol, you have to do it this way only for it to work. That is absolutely not true. There's always ways that we can craft things in such a manner that can be effective, even if they have to be kind of like tweaked to meet a person. Does this make sense? Right? So, for example, when metals appear on an HTMA, you know, a lot of times in the beginning, people get a little freaked out when they see it, right? My approach is very methodical rather than reactive. First, I want to explain why it's there potentially, identify ongoing exposures, eliminate any current sources, um, then look at the rest of their pattern and assess, like, okay, what's their capacity? What's their nervous system capacity? What is going on in their life? What can they actually do about this right now, realistically, without throwing them into another level of overwhelm? And then third, I want to be building foundations strategically, and I want to incorporate free things that they can do. Things that are just incredibly sensible, such as, their exposure to natural light. Honestly, without that piece, we aren't going to get very far in a way that sustains the change we're trying to make. In addition to grounding practices, and sometimes people can't do nature-based grounding practices the way that we might want to, or maybe I want to, or maybe people are observing me do as I'm showing, and they're, like, I can't do what you do. And I'm like, well, you can certainly do something. Let's figure out what it is and get you going, as well as proper hydration. And this is a conversation we need to keep having because we haven't had proper hydration taught to us effectively on many, many levels. There's so much that is affecting our hydration, and we need to be layering in ways to improve this in every person's case over time. Like, for example, how EMFs drain our minerals. Let's talk about that another time. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's many pieces of the modern life that have impacted all of us. And we need to start with layer number one for the person in front of us. Like, okay, what are you doing? Okay, let's improve it some. Let's get you further than you were before, right? Good, better, best. And then the other piece that I believe, and not many people have said it this way that I can tell, is getting baseline mineral support, right? Before stacking on the deeper protocols the labs are wanting us to do. I truly believe many people need that layer for a time. Not the excessive amounts that are recommended to correct the pattern directly, but to shore the person up for their drains. Such as like the lack of proper hydration. Now you're getting the water better, but you still are in a deficit. And so you need to shore up that deficit with a baseline of support. And you need to understand that baseline of support so that in case you don't continue with this deeper work to reroute the biochemistry and deal with the heavy metals, because not everyone will, they can walk away with the baseline of mineral support and always implement it no matter what. To me, this is a very ethical way to approach this, honestly. And all the things that I just mentioned, those top 4, I could say a lot more, but this creates to me what I call like a layer that is like it creates a safety signal to the body. It helps to establish stability before attempting deeper work. And so from this foundation, we can strategically advance by learning how to analyze health history patterns better, and start to improve the oxidation rates and energy production of the person. Monitor their nervous system response to the interventions we are recommending. Adapt the protocols along the way to accommodate what's going on in their life. So the reality, that I see often overlooked is typically it's like a pushing aggressive protocols during periods of significant life stress. That typically backfires. Like, you guys have heard me tell my story umpteen times in a million ways till Sunday of all the things that I've been through. And there was no way that I could do some of the recommendations that some of the people, who practice this modality are suggesting that needs to be part of a whole entire program. Like, not everybody's life is conducive to this giant whole entire program, right? We just have to take the elements that we can and create the best foundation we can to work with people through the phases of life that they're in. Okay. And sometimes maintaining stability is the most profound intervention until life circumstances allow for the deeper healing work, in my opinion. So I want to talk about the art of disclosure, like when and how to share sensitive health information. So the complexity deepens when we consider patterns in the HTMA world that suggest hidden issues, right? Even without direct evidence on tests, like we know that we were taught that, such and such a pattern can show something hidden. Say, for example, copper, right? We most of us who study HTMA know that's a piece of Dr. X's work, was the whole hidden copper toxicity. Now, this presents a profound ethical question, in my opinion. How do we honor both truth and timing in our client communication? So I've learned through both sides of this experience as a practitioner and a client that there's a tangible cost to like a premature warnings about potential toxicities. So, and I've seen this a lot. Okay. So consider this reality. Like, do I need to call a client in a vulnerable biochemical state to express concern about hidden copper toxicity that I see on a graph? Like, should I call them before I even meet with them? Should I tell them, oh my gosh, I think you have hidden copper toxicity. Oh my word, I'm so concerned. Or does this create a new stress burden that may actually impede their healing capacity? The other one that I've heard over and over and over is the death pattern in, Dr. Wilson's language around the pattern that has all 4 mean macrominerals low, which is called the 4 lows based on ARL's work, and TEI doesn't recognize it that way at all, which is why I appreciate Dr. Malter so much, because he's very sensible and he, has explained over and over that is a very fear based way to look at a pattern, and it does not help people, especially whose nervous system capacity is struggling to figure out its grounding, right? So, for many clients already navigating overwhelming health journeys, these kinds of disclosures can really trigger heightened anxiety that taxes an already compromised nervous system. The desperate research spirals that like many women come to me having told me that they went on. And I believe that fragments our focus from the foundational healing, which is why in my work, I created a foundational course to go along with my client work because I am aware people are out there researching till the cows come home. And you guys, the information buffet can be incredibly overwhelming, and fragment us away from doing the work that is the most foundational, albeit maybe seemingly unsexy. And then even like this like premature self-treatment that may like just destabilize people's delicate biochemical balance. Like I can't tell you how many times people have written me and told me in their write-ups, like they literally say all the technical terms about their health concerns, but like they're not literally telling me at all what is actually happening in their body and in their life. And I find that very interesting. It's like we are labeling ourselves, well, my this part of my body and that part of my body, and and we're labeling ourselves, but yet then we are missing all this beautiful nuance of like weaving the whole picture of our life together so we can better understand like how to support ourselves as a whole. So this is why I've come to do my very best. I can't say have perfected this. I'm always trying to work on this, but I've come to embrace a more measured approach. And I'm always listening as people come in. And there's times when, I've had people come in and they were like, tell me everything I need to do. And I'm like, you're not ready. Oh my goodness. And it's like you have to be the fork in the road for the people coming to you, right? So we have to assess readiness before disclosure of potential deeper issues. Right? We have to frame our findings as patterns rather than definitive, clinical diagnoses or issues or whatever, right? And I just really strongly believe we need to establish safety through foundational support before introducing potentially triggering information. Or not that it's triggering information, it's just that I believe it's our job to understand how to present it. And it's not always easy. I'm not going to say that I always do this perfectly, but I'm always seeking to do so. And make sure that, people are ready to feel comfortable. They have to feel safe and be talked to in a way that helps them understand more thoroughly why we're taking the approach we're taking, why it matters for them and how it correlates to them, and create that context, right, that emphasizes the body's innate capacity to heal with the proper support. So to me, some of the ways we've seen this being approached in the past requires a little reprioritization to meet the human of the times, right? And I think that we need to look at nervous system, let's call it stabilization, as like a prerequisite to like a deeper mineral balancing detoxification protocol. Um, and then kind of like mineral balance, meaning like remineralizing, like shoring the person up as a foundation to help them have more biochemical resilience to reduce the overall stress on their pattern, right? And then, it sets them up to build and stack upon. I also believe we need to prioritize digestive and gut integrity far before we ever get into, trying to push out the metals or any kind of aggressive interventions. Too much, too soon, too fast, too overwhelming, that kind of stuff. And then of course, I know we all know this is like sleep quality. How does a person like deal with their stress? Do they have, and I hate the word stress management. It just feels so, I don't know, business like, but what is your stress resilience? Like, how do you build stress resilience? Um, these are non-negotiable foundations that, like, y doing too much when those are not solid, it just doesn't make sense to me. Um, so take a middle path. Like, I wanna take the middle path where we're going beyond just the metrics, just the lab protocols, just here's this modality, here's the way to do it, right? Like, to really help people with true well-being, right? Like, our quick fix culture struggles with this truth so much, but unf the unfolding of authentic healing, it's it can be slow. And it's definitely in layers, and it definitely requires, like, careful, preparation and reassessment and recalibration. While I do believe there are indeed times for urgent intervention, I definitely, I'm not saying that's not true. It is true, but it's just really the exception rather than the rule. And shouldn't we rather be teaching people how to build health than just like feed a man a fish, he eats for a day kind of thing, right? Like, we can take them on this journey and teach them, the foundations for their health so they can go beyond their time with us, whether it be 6 months, a year, 2 years. They're able to have this, like, I don't know, what do we call it? The school of life around health that none of us ever got because of the way that, the world is structured. So that's what I say. I say we learn to walk a middle path, one in which we embrace teaching a healthy lifestyle, we live it ourselves, we demonstrate it. But also we do it without adding anxiety to our lives, without being like, "Oh my gosh, there's all these health influencers shouting about all these things we're supposed to do." And it's like, well, you do the part that you can do right now, and then do it and stick with it and then come back. By the time you implement something long enough, you will realize you'll want to be ready to stack on. So it's important we all recognize where we're at and do what we can do and do it. Like, do it effectively. And I think we have to develop the skill to sift through the grift of wellness culture, and really, like, become our own filters and distinguish between what genuinely serves healing and what merely capitalizes on health fears. Right? Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want that done to me. And I want to educate, but I also am always thinking, like, well, how are people receiving what I'm saying? Like, gosh. So let me give context. Let me give nuance. And I also think in our metrics obsessed world, there can be this, like, confusion of, like, I don't know, symbols of well-being, if you will, with the feeling of well-being, right? Like, like, I don't know, like, people have sleep apps, or they have all these different apps, or they have all these different tests that they do and all these things, right? Like, but if you're staring at your sleep app to determine whether or not you slept well, that's the tech isn't the thing. You are the tech. Your human body, your body knows intimately what's going on. You have to learn to tune into it, because our body knows the score. Go read that book, by the way. The Body Keeps the Score. That's a good one. So this innate wisdom we all have, we have to learn to tune into it. So as practitioners, we need to do this so we can teach our clients how to do this. And what we feel in our systems is what ultimately matters more than any external measurement or marker we might track, even an HTMA result. All right. So to me, this approach shifts the practitioner-client relationship from, like, this outdated, like, expert diagnosis and treatment model to one of a more of a skillful partnership in creating the conditions for healing to emerge naturally and sustainably. The truth is the body heals itself. So what are we doing to create the conditions to allow it to do that? How can we help our clients learn this? How can we help them move towards this? And not to mention, in this era we're in, it's unprecedented toxic burden and nervous system overwhelm. Perhaps our greatest medicine is found not in faster intervention, but in more patient restoration, honoring the body's wisdom, honoring the body's timeline, even when it conflicts with our cultural conditioning around fixing and like what we consider efficiency, if you will. All right, I will step off my soapbox now. I hope you found that helpful. And here's how I can support you on your HTMA journey. There are two primary ways if you're a practitioner. One, on your own health journey with HTMA. One pattern I've consistently noticed over the years is what I call the practitioner's paradox. Many skilled professionals reach out to me saying, I have the training to read my own results. Yet, here they are seeking something deeper. And so, despite their current knowledge base, they find themselves stuck in their personal healing journey in some form or fashion, right? And this isn't a reflection on your capabilities as a practitioner, it's simply human nature. And there's inevitably, guys, I talk so fast. My words, man, I'm sorry. It's just like an Aries moon thing. There are inevitably going to be gaps in what we all have concretized for ourselves. And there's going to be blind spots we cannot see. While it's relatively easy to remain objective and effective when we work with our clients, applying that same clarity to our own health situations is profoundly more challenging. This is precisely why I have, you know, always wanted to have a guide who is further along on the journey. And I think it's incredibly invaluable, especially if this is something you're going to be doing to help others. You might as well have your own version of you for them, for you. Does that make sense? So I myself have often reached out directly to those I respected to learn from and said, hey, what can you teach me right now if you're willing? And it doesn't mean any of us are ineffective or incapable. It simply means we have room for growth and would benefit from seeing our situation through a wider lens. So when practitioners do work with me on their personal HTMA journey, if they, are willing to collaborate and communicate and talk to me and go back and forth, they often experience clarity about why certain approaches haven't worked for them, as well as a more nuanced understanding of their unique biochemical patterns. Um, and then greater confidence in implementing protocols for themselves and then, insights that ultimately enhance their work with clients. So if you'd like to work with me one-on-one on your personal health journey or with a family members, like such as a child, where you're just finding it difficult to detach emotionally as you help them, which is totally understandable. Um, oh my goodness, right? So I offer, a special consideration for fellow practitioners. You can do any of my services at all. And I will provide a coupon code that deducts the cost of the lab fee that you have already likely invested in and have your lab results. Right. So you don't have to pay for that again. I will, give you a coupon code for the cost of that. Um, so if that's something you have, wanted help with or have considered, you can email me directly at connect@lydiajoy.me to arrange the support. And then the second way is through mentorship for clinical practice. Right now, I'm not building a practitioner course at this time. It is an enormous undertaking to do that with extreme effectiveness and, oh my gosh, thoroughness and all the things. So if you already understand the HTMA principles, maybe you've taken a couple of courses already from people who have experience in practice, hopefully, and you're working with clients in your practice currently, especially you've been doing this for 1 to 2 years, and you want mentorship, That's what I'm offering at this time. So you can, deepen your approach to crafting bio-individual client protocols. We'll focus on the nuances of assessment, communication, implementation that make the differences between, temporary improvement and sustainable healing. So if you are ready for a different approach to HTMA than what you currently feel you have, many practitioners reach out asking about this for me. So if you're seeking to develop this more balanced approach to HTMA interpretation and client support, um, I'm definitely taking, a few select folks for one-on-one mentorship opportunities where we can assess your current practice approach, identify your unique strengths and growth edges, address gaps in understanding complex cases, develop your intuitive discernment alongside technical skills, create ethical communication frameworks for sensitive findings, build a sustainable practice that honors both you and your clients. And my gift lies in these sustained developmental relationships where I can truly see you, your work, your health journey. Um, Not like the quick fix, like, "Here, let me just quick do this thing and it'll help me and I'll get better," right? It lies in that the journey of it, right? So and that's how I'm able to then offer targeted wisdom that can really catalyze your evolution as a practitioner. So if you're interested in exploring whether this mentorship approach would serve you in your practice at this time, I'm going to invite you to reach out for a conversation. So the first step would be just email me. Email me, connect@lydiajoy.me with the subject line HTMA mentorship inquiry to start the conversation. And we'll go from there. And we'll craft something that fits you. That's the beauty of this. It'll be somewhat similar to the framework I have for my coaching work, which is on my website if you care to look at that, but it'll be more towards this piece of, learning everything that I just covered. All right. So the path, of balanced foundation first practice isn't always like the quickest, if you will, like in terms of like, I don't know, it's going to create the most sustainable results for both practitioners and their clients. We just really have to get away from the rush and the hurry and the quick fix. So I'm in this for the long game. I mean, I've been doing it for over 10 years and I am not going anywhere. I love it so much and I'm still learning. I'm still learning tons and I'm finding it fascinating to be able to review all the patterns that I've gone through over the years and just continue to take what I've seen in this last decade and weave it into support and teaching and, just take people further with what I've seen. So, all right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Um, and, just reach out, like I said, if that's of interest to you, at any point, just to see if I have the availability. You're really just kind of fitting in as like a client would fit into my schedule at this time. So, you know, I usually have some space available, but just go ahead and reach out, email me, and I'd love to support you and see if it's a good fit for both of us to collaborate in this fashion. So, all for now. Until next time, thanks for listening.